Part 1. Graduation Night and the Vanishing. Chapter 1. The Last Celebration. The air in Springfield, Missouri, on June 6, 1992, hung heavy with humidity and the electric buzz of anticipation. It was a Saturday, the kind that marks the end of an era. For the seniors of Kickapoo High School, the world was opening up. The sun had set on their high school careers, and the night belonged to them. Among the sea of caps and gowns sat Suzanne, Susie, Streeter, 19, and her best friend, Stacy McCall, 18. They were the picture of early 90s youth, big smiles, bright futures, and a friendship that seemed unbreakable. Susie was bold, athletic, and fiercely protective. Stacy was the effervescent one, the girl with the contagiously sunny disposition who had already planned her future at Southwest Missouri State University. While the girls celebrated, 47-year-old Cheryl Levitt was settling into her new life. Cheryl, Susie's mother, was a striking woman with a distinct look, short, styled blonde hair and a tenacious work ethic. She was a cosmetologist, well liked by her clients, and a devoted single mother. She had recently purchased the small, white bungalow at 1717 East Delmar Street. It was a modest house, but it was theirs. Cheryl had spent the last few weeks painting, refurbishing furniture, and making it a home. At 11:15 p.m., Cheryl was at the house on Delmar. She spoke on the phone with a friend. Her voice was calm, perhaps a little tired. She mentioned she was sanding and painting a chest of drawers. The conversation was mundane, the kind of forgettable chat you have when you assume you'll speak again tomorrow. It was the last time anyone would hear Cheryl Levitt's voice. Chapter 2. The timeline of the night. Meanwhile, the graduation festivities were in full swing. The timeline of Susie and Stacy's movements is etched into the lore of Springfield, a map of stops that leads to a dead end. 10:30 p.m. The girls left a graduation party at a private residence. They were in high spirits, hopping into their separate cars before meeting up again. The Battlefield Park. They stopped briefly at Battlefield Park, a popular local hangout, but the night was young. The Janelle Kirby stop. The plan was originally for the girls to stay at a hotel, then a friend's house in nearby Battlefield, but plans shifted as they often do with teenagers. 2 a.m., June 7th, Susie and Stacy left the final party in Battlefield. It was late. They were tired. Instead of driving all the way back to the friend's house where they were scheduled to sleep, they made a fateful, last-minute decision. They would head to Susie's house, Cheryl's house, on Delmar Street to sleep. It was closer. It was safe. They drove in separate cars. Susie drove her red Ford Escort. Stacy drove her parents' beige Toyota Corolla. The drive would have been quiet. The streets of Springfield were empty at 2:15 a.m. They pulled into the circular driveway of 1717 East Delmar. They parked their cars. They walked up the steps. What happened in the moments between them closing their car doors and the sun rising over Springfield remains one of the most baffling mysteries in American criminal history. Chapter 3. The Discovery. The sun rose on June 7th, burning off the morning mist. It was supposed to be a day of relaxation, perhaps a trip to the water park. At around 8 a.m., the phone rang in the McCall household. Janice McCall, Stacy's mother, hadn't heard from her daughter. This wasn't like Stacy. Stacy was the type of girl who called if she was going to be 5 minutes late. Panic, a cold and quiet seed, began to take root. At 9 a.m., Janelle Kirby, a close friend of Susie and Stacy, along with her boyfriend, arrived at the house on Delmar Street. They were looking for the girls, intending to head to the water park as planned. The scene they walked into was confusingly normal, yet deeply wrong. The three cars were parked in the driveway: Cheryl's Cavalier, Susie's Escort, and Stacy's Corolla. If the cars were there, the women had to be there. Janelle walked up to the front porch. She noticed something odd immediately. The glass globe of the porch light was shattered. Shards of glass littered the concrete stoop. Being a helpful friend, and not realizing she was standing on a crime scene, Janelle swept the glass to the side with her foot to keep anyone from stepping on it. It was an innocent action that would later haunt investigators, the potential destruction of crucial evidence. The front door was unlocked. Janelle and her boyfriend pushed the door open and called out, "Susie? Stacy? Cheryl? Silence. The house was cool, the air conditioning was running. But the silence was heavy. It wasn't the silence of people sleeping in, it was the silence of a void. Chapter 4. The Frozen Scene. As Janelle moved through the house, the normality of the scene became terrifying. The dog, Cheryl's Yorkshire Terrier, Cinnamon, was inside. The dog was small, typically yappy, but appeared incredibly agitated and anxious. The purses. In Susie's room, all three women's purses were found. Cheryl's, Susie's, and Stacy's. They were lined up on the steps to the sunken bedroom. Inside were their cigarettes, lighters, makeup, and significantly, their money. No robbery had taken place. The beds. Cheryl's bed looked slept in. The sheets were rumpled. A book lay on the nightstand, glasses nearby. It appeared she had been reading, perhaps fallen asleep, and was then interrupted. Susie's bed, a waterbed, was unmade, the sheets pulled back as if ready for someone to climb in, but it was unclear if they ever had. Clothing. Stacy's clothing from the night before, her flowered shorts and jewelry, were folded neatly on a chair. This suggested she had changed. But into what? Susie's graduation gown was hanging up. There was no blood. There were no overturned chairs. There were no holes in the drywall. There was absolutely zero sign of a struggle. It was as if they had simply evaporated. Chapter 5. The Lost Message. While Janelle was in the house, the phone rang. The answering machine picked up. It was a strange, disjointed message. Reports vary on the exact content, but it was a male voice, possibly making lewd or nonsensical comments. In a moment that illustrates the chaos of the morning, the message was accidentally deleted. Whoever had called, whatever they had said, was gone forever. Was it the perpetrator taunting them? Was it a wrong number? Was it a prank? To this day, the deleted message remains an agonizing what if. By noon, Janice McCall arrived at the house. She described walking in and feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She saw her daughter's purse. She saw the cars. She knew. Mothers know. She called the police. Chapter 6. The investigation begins. The Springfield Police Department arrived, but the golden hour, that critical first window of time in a missing persons case, had been severely compromised. Friends had been in and out of the house all morning. Surfaces had been touched. The glass on the porch had been swept. The answering machine tape had been erased. Police cordoned off the house, treating it belatedly as a major crime scene. They began to canvass the neighborhood. This is where the first real clue, and the first major frustration, emerge. A neighbor reported hearing a noise around the time the girls would have arrived. They described it not as a scream, but as a metal-on-metal sound. Like a car backfiring, or perhaps a porch light globe being unscrewed and dropped. Another neighbor, further down the street, reported seeing a distinct vehicle. An older model, green van. It was driven by a man, looking out of place in the quiet suburban neighborhood. The van had no hubcaps. It was seen lingering. The timeline was tightened. 2:15 a.m. Girls arrive. Wait time. They enter, lock the door, get ready for bed. Stacy changes clothes. They remove makeup. Washcloths were found with makeup stains. The abduction. Sometime between 2:30 a.m. and 6 a.m., someone entered that house. How did they get three women, one of them a fierce mother, one a scrappy 19-year-old, out of a house without a scream, without a fight, and without a trace? The leading theory among investigators began to form: control. Whoever did this had a gun. You don't move three people quietly without the threat of immediate, lethal force. The shattered porch light suggested a ruse. Did the killer unscrew the bulb to darken the entry, entice Cheryl to open the door to check the light, and then force his way in? As night fell on June 7, 1992, the reality set in. Cheryl, Susie, and Stacy were gone. The investigation that followed would span 3 decades, unearth horrific suspects, and dig up the concrete of Springfield, but it would never bring them home. Part 2. The Shadows and the Concrete. Chapter 7. The Ghost Sightings. In the weeks following June 7, 1992, The faces of Cheryl, Susie, and Stacy were plastered on every telephone pole, grocery store window, and gas station in the Midwest. The police tip line rang incessantly. In the desperation of a missing persons case, every phone call offers a glimmer of hope, but most lead to heartbreaking dead ends. However, one sighting stood out, haunting investigators with its plausibility. A waitress at George's Steakhouse, a diner popular with locals, came forward with a story that made the hair on the arms of detectives stand up. She claimed that between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. on the night of the disappearance, or possibly the following night, witness memory is notoriously fragile, she saw the three women come in. She described Susie Streeter vividly. She said Susie appeared intoxicated or perhaps drugged, struggling to keep her head up. She described Cheryl as acting protective, hovering over Susie, trying to calm her. But it was the male companion who froze the waitress's blood. She described a man with them, rough-looking, controlling. When the women tried to leave or move, he would herd them. The waitress noted that when the group left, they did so in a rush, leaving behind the chaotic energy of people under duress. Was this them? If it was, why did they go to a diner? Was the intoxication actually a concussion or the effects of sedation? The timeline, 1 o'clock to 3 a.m., overlaps dangerously with the time they were meant to be at the Delmar house. If the sighting was real, it suggests they were taken, then moved, then taken somewhere else. This sighting remains unverified, but it painted a terrifying picture. The women were alive, in public, and terrified, yet no one saved them. Chapter 8. The Man with the Alibi, Robert Craig Cox. As the years dragged on, the list of suspects grew and shrank. But one name burned brighter and hotter than the others: Robert Craig Cox. Cox was a convicted kidnapper. In 1992, he was living in Springfield. He had served time on death row in Florida for the murder of a 19-year-old woman, a conviction later overturned on appeal due to insufficient evidence, though he was undoubtedly dangerous. Cox was in Springfield working as a utility worker. His presence in the city was a coincidence that felt like fate. When questioned, Cox had an alibi. He claimed he was with his girlfriend at church on the morning of June 7, and she corroborated his story. The police, bound by the alibi, moved on. But years later, the alibi crumbled. The girlfriend recanted, admitting she had lied to protect him. This revelation put Cox squarely back in the crosshairs. But by then, he was back in prison in Texas for a separate aggravated robbery. When journalists and detectives visited him to ask about the Springfield Three, Cox played a sadistic game of cat and mouse. He told investigators that he knew the women were dead. He claimed they were buried near Springfield. In a chilling interview, he looked into the camera and said, "I know that they're dead. And I know where they're at. And I also know that they will never be found." He hinted that the bodies were destroyed or placed in a location where nature or construction had sealed them away forever. Was he telling the truth, or was he a psychopath enjoying the attention? Cox remains the primary suspect in the eyes of many, but without a body, there is no murder charge. Chapter 9. The Legend of the Green Van. While Cox represents the known evil, the green van represents the unknown. Multiple witnesses in the Delmar neighborhood reported seeing an older, 1960s or 70s Dodge van in the days leading up to the disappearance. It was described as dull green or brown. It was seen driving slowly, prowling. One witness claimed a man in the van made a lewd comment to her nearby. The van is crucial because it answers the logistical question: how do you move three women? You don't put three struggling adults in the backseat of a sedan. You need a sliding door. You need space. You need a van. Despite thousands of tips and vehicle checks, the specific green van was never located. It drove out of Springfield and into the fog of history. Chapter 10. The Tomb Beneath the Hospital. Of all the theories surrounding the case, none is as persistent, or as horrifying, as the Cox South Hospital parking garage theory. In 2007, a tipster came forward with a story that seemed too specific to be made up. They claimed that the bodies of Cheryl, Susie, and Stacy were buried in the foundations of the new parking garage at Cox South Hospital, which was under construction in the summer of 1992. The theory goes like this: the killer, or killers, needed a place to hide the bodies where they would never be dug up. A construction site with fresh concrete being poured daily is the perfect graveyard. Rick Norland, a mechanical engineer, took an interest in the case. He used ground-penetrating radar, GPR, to scan the concrete floor of the parking garage. The results were startling. The scan revealed 3 distinct anomalies, roughly 3 feet below the surface. The anomalies were consistent in size and shape with human remains. The city held its breath. It seemed like the answer was right there, encased in stone. However, the Springfield Police Department refused to dig. Their reasoning was procedural and pragmatic. The GPR can show anomalies, but those anomalies could be anything: chunks of rebar, tree roots, or construction debris. Without more specific corroborating evidence tying a suspect to that location, they could not justify the immense cost and structural risk of tearing up a multi-story hospital parking garage. To this day, the anomalies remain beneath the concrete. Shoppers and patients park their cars there every day, unaware that they might be driving over the final resting place of the Springfield Three. Chapter 11: The Webster County Farm. While the hospital theory captures the imagination, police investigators often lean toward a more rural solution. Springfield is surrounded by vast, open farmland and dense woods. Another search focused on a farm in Webster County. A tip suggested the women were taken there, held for a short period, and their bodies disposed of in an old well or sinkhole. Missouri is known as the cave state. The geography is riddled with natural hiding places. Searches were conducted. Dogs were brought in. While some items of interest were found in the vicinity, vague connections to the women's belongings, no DNA link was ever established. The rural landscape swallowed the secrets just as effectively as the concrete. Chapter 12: The Emotional Toll. As the 90s turned into the 2000s, the families were left in a state of ambiguous loss. Janice McCall, Stacy's mother, became a fierce advocate for missing persons. She founded a nonprofit refusing to let Stacy's name fade. She kept the porch light on. She kept the phone number the same, just in case Stacy tried to call. The psychological torture for the families was the lack of a crime scene, in the traditional sense. No blood meant there was always a 0.1% chance they were being held somewhere. It prevented the grieving process from ever truly starting. The investigation produced 40,000 pages of files. It ruined marriages, exhausted detectives, and changed the way the community looked at their neighbors. People started locking their doors. The innocence of the quiet Springfield summer was shattered. Part 3: The Long Wait and the Enduring Echo. Chapter 13: The Cold Case Reality. As the calendar pages turned from the 1990s into the new millennium, the investigation into the Springfield Three shifted gears. It moved from a hot case, fueled by adrenaline and fresh leads, to a cold case, fueled by persistence and data analysis. The file grew to occupy an entire wall at the Springfield Police Headquarters. Over 45,000 tips had been logged. Detectives who had worked the case on day one retired, handing the boxes over to a new generation of investigators who had been children when the women vanished. In 2010, the police invited the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, VICAP, to conduct a specialized review. They digitized the files, hoping that modern algorithms might find a connection a weary detective had missed in 1992. They looked for similar modus operandi, across state lines. Had a predator moved through Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma? They re-examined the few physical scraps they had. The layout of the house. The specific timeline of the broken light. The deleted answering machine message. But the frustration remained. No DNA. Because there was no struggle, there was no blood, no hair under fingernails, no foreign fibers that could be tested against the rapidly advancing forensic databases like Cody's. The crime scene was pristine, which was the killer's greatest weapon. Chapter 14: The Deck of Cards. In an attempt to shake loose new leads, Missouri law enforcement tried a psychological tactic. They distributed decks of playing cards to inmates in state prisons. On the faces of these cards were not kings and queens, but the faces of unsolved homicide victims and missing persons. Cheryl, Susie, and Stacy were featured. The logic was simple. In the criminal underworld, information is currency. Perhaps an inmate playing poker in Jefferson City knew something. Perhaps Robert Cox had bragged to a cellmate. Perhaps someone wanted to trade a secret for a reduced sentence. While the program generated chatter, it didn't produce the smoking gun. The silence from the criminal world matched the silence on Delmar Street. Chapter 15. The House on Delmar Today. If you drive past 1717 East Delmar Street today, you might miss it. It is a house that looks desperately normal. The trees have grown taller. The paint color has changed over the years. Different families have lived there, washing dishes in the same sink Cheryl used, sleeping in the rooms where Susie and Stacy planned to rest. For the community of Springfield, the house is a monument. It is a physical reminder of the vulnerability of safety. It stands as a testament to the fact that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a quiet night in a quiet suburb. The famous porch light has been replaced, but the story of the broken globe is retold to every new rookie cop joining the force. Chapter 16. The Legacy of the Three. The disappearance of the Springfield Three changed the DNA of the city. It ended the era of leaving front doors unlocked. It changed how parents tracked their teenagers. Janice McCall, Stacy's mother, became a warrior for the missing. She refused to let the world speak of them in the past tense without proof. Her efforts helped streamline how missing persons reports were handled in Missouri, ensuring that families wouldn't have to wait through arbitrary waiting periods before police took action. Susie Streeter is remembered not just as a victim, but as a protector. The evidence suggests she was likely the target, or the one who fought back, mentally, if not physically, trying to shield her mother and friend. Cheryl Levitt is remembered as a woman who was building a new life, a loving mother who opened her door to her daughter's friend, an act of kindness that cost her everything. Chapter 17. Conclusion, The Open Wound. This section is designed to be your video's closing monologue. 33 years later, the mystery of the Springfield Three remains one of the most chilling open wounds in American true crime. 3 women, 3 cars, 1 broken light bulb. They vanished into the ether, leaving behind their money, their cigarettes, and their pets. They left behind a graduation gown that would never be worn again and a house that still holds its breath. We know that someone knows. The person who drove that green van. The person who shattered that porch light. The person who watched them from the shadows. Until that person speaks, or until the concrete beneath Springfield gives up its dead, Cheryl, Susie, and Stacy remain frozen in time, forever young, forever together, and forever waiting to come home. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of the Springfield Three, please contact the Springfield Police Department. It is never too late to light the way home.